Ed Blakely has served in different capacities under a succession of presidential administrations, has guided government policy on urban planning and is a widely cited academic. My name is Sean Britton from 2SER 107.3 in Sydney, and each week Ed and I have a chat about what's the latest news out of the United States, talking everything politics, planning and policy from sea to shining sea. Find us on iTunes, Whooshka, Facebook and Twitter at US of Ed. Ohio's special election, it looks like Republican Troy Balderson might come away with a win on a razor-sharp margin, although thanks to provisional votes at the time we're speaking, still too close to call. This is an area that Trump won in 2016 by 11 points, so regardless of who gets the big prize, Democrats looking at this as a win.
Yeah, and there are two reasons for that. One of them is this is a traditional Republican seat. This is not one they won recently. Also, Trump carried this place by 15% or more. And furthermore, this is a heartland. So if he's not playing well there, where is he playing well? Now, it is true from his point of view, this is a victory, and he's already announced it. If it goes the other way, I don't know what he'll see. He might even go quiet on Twitter. But for the Democrats, this is also a victory. And let's hope they don't start beating their chest on it, but start working, because it'll only take a little bit more. Midterms elections are not big voter turnout elections. So what has to happen is there needs to be a big turnout when the electorate knows what's at stake. And in this one, they didn't.
It's been said both parties put their absolute best feet forward in terms of candidates in Ohio. What lessons should Republicans and Democrats be looking for to either hold or take the House in November?
Well, Republicans need to distance themselves from Trump. The governor of Ohio has really distanced himself from Trump and is telling that candidate to do the same thing. I think a lot more candidates will distance themselves from Trump if they're Republicans. Democrats have to run on local issues first, not on Trump. And the second thing they have to run on is health care. There's still a threat to health care, and that means an awful lot to people. And thirdly, on local jobs. Local good jobs are being destroyed by this administration in agriculture and in major production industries. So, and this rollback of the environmental issues in California is going to be a huge deal. The auto companies aren't even for it because they have to sell these cars in Europe. So why should they go through this new headache? We'll see. But I think the problem I see right now is the Democrats might become exhausted just by trying to counter all the craziness of Trump. It's really exhausting. It's exhausting for you and me, isn't it?
Absolutely, mate. I mean, once upon a time we didn't have Trump to talk about each and every single week. Away from politics for a moment, the California wildfires, biggest, I believe, in the state's history. This is just terrible stuff, Ed.
It is terrible stuff. But remember, California has these wildfires because there are more people building into the hills. That's a lesson for every country around the world. As you know, these fires are getting bigger because in some low-income countries, poor countries, people are setting up their informal settlements in the hills around the city. And they're having fires and floods. In our case, it is more people are moving, the tree changers into the mountains. And as soon as a house starts burning, it adds a huge amount of fuel for a fire. So California is in big trouble in the long run here.
Speaking of the long run, given your background in disaster management and recovery, any lessons to be learned?
Well, that's the first one. If you're going to build there, build with different materials. The second one, people don't realize their animals, dogs and cats, are big dangers to the environment because they draw away the birds and other things that drop seeds and seedlings that help keep the fire down. So there has to be a whole educational process. We're not going to be able to do this with chemicals and airplanes and stuff. It means we're going to have to draw the line someplace. And I can imagine big zones, almost a kilometer wide, of fire breaks to keep these fires from getting so big and so horrendously dangerous.
Should we even bother to talk about Trump's comments blaming California's environment laws for the blows?
Why should we honor his comments? But the problem here is Trump is dividing a nation. Don't you go to people and say, I'm sorry this happened to you. You don't blame people. You don't castigate them. Mr. Trump is president of the United States. That includes California and Puerto Rico.
Back on Trump, unfortunately, he's hyped up the rhetoric and sanctions on Iran and also said on Twitter, anyone doing business with Iran will not be doing business with the United States. Ironically, he's claimed he's willing to settle for nothing less than world peace. It seems to be leaving the US more and more isolated.
It is. Clearly, the Europeans trade as a bloc. So is he saying the United States will not trade with Europe? It will not trade with Australia. It will not trade with most of Asia, all of whom trade with Iran. So here we have the possibility of a trade embargo. There's a one-country trade embargo. This really helps the Iranians because now they can go and say, hey, the U.S. isn't buying this stuff. We're going to pay. We have to add a 10% surcharge on what we sell here. So the Iranians are loving it.
Also, rather ironically, as you and I well know, once upon a time Trump was very critical of Obama in Iran, claiming Obama was going to be starting a war in that country. Once again, Trump is looking like he has the potential just to start a war to distract from his own scandals, and yet I'm not real sure how much his tweets really affect actual national policy.
Well, he has to be real careful here. His last couple of tweets about his son and the June 16th event sound very much like obstruction of justice. Now, if these tweets reflect what the government's going to do, our government policy, and reflect his policies, he's going to jail, and his son is going to jail. Because now he says that meeting was about Russia. Before, it was about adopting children. That change in story, A, is a lie. So by lying to the FBI and the Congress, you're in trouble. And if it's true, you're really in trouble because the federal law here is very clear. You cannot, under any circumstances, deal with a foreign entity and get foreign cash or information from that entity in an election at any level in the United States.
At the very least, looking at possible perjury charges for Donald Trump Jr.
Absolutely. Perjury before Congress, perjury before the FBI, and now perjury before the American people.
Sticking with Russia for a moment, Trump administration on Wednesday said it would impose new sanctions against Russia due to Russia's use of a nerve agent in an attempt in March to assassinate an ex-Russian intelligence agent and his daughter. Putin didn't give Trump his personal powerful denials on this one, I guess?
This was in the works by the administration, and particularly the Secretary of the UN. It has been in the works for a while. He is now powerless to stop his own administration from doing things because if he tries to countermand that order, he creates havoc internally. So he has a silly situation where he's not in charge of his own people. Pompano, the Secretary of State, is not following his orders, just like the last Secretary of State didn't. And the Secretary of Defense is not following his orders. And believe it or not, the new guy in the EPA has countermanded the prior orders and put back a lot of things he put in. So we have a situation here where this is like a basketball team where anybody who has the ball can shoot.
Speaking of basketball, leads us rather nicely to another little Twitter attack from Trump this week. This one less serious in terms of global stability, but perhaps more telling about the man himself. After basketballer LeBron James made some, I thought, actually incredibly mild criticisms of Trump during an interview, the president of the United States couldn't help saying LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do. I like Mike. Even Melania couldn't stand behind this one and actually came to LeBron's defense. Don Lemon's fired back saying Trump is a racist and a bully. Look, it's a great example of his problematic behavior, but is there really anything new?
No, there isn't anything new. The problem is the rednecks, the skinheads, and those people take courage from those remarks. And we'll see somebody shoot somebody, stab somebody, or something like that. The terrible thing is we have a person who is not a leader in charge in the United States.
Goes back to the California comments, really this division instead of sewing things back together.
Yeah, and that cannot continue. A nation divided against itself cannot survive. Abraham Lincoln.
And the Manafort trial this week. Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's former business partner, as well as another figure closely linked to the Trump administration, brought on as star witness, admitted to falsifying documents with Manafort to disguise foreign income, knowingly committing crimes. A few rubles here and there, perhaps, Ed.
A few million rubles here and there. How Manafort could be broke is beyond me, when it's obvious from the testimony is he really had a lot of money coming in to his coffers. Millions, multi-millions, and now he's broke. Where did that money go? It's strange. But the deeper issue here is, will Manafort or anyone around him turn Trump in? Because he was there in a vital time during the campaign when the Russians were all over the campaign. Did he get in that campaign because he needed Russian money or Russians planted him there? I think this may be one of the reasons he's not saying much, because if he turns left into the hands of the Russians, he's in real trouble, gives them away. If he turns right in the hands of Mueller, he's in real trouble. He's in trouble whichever way he turns.
And just one more on the Russia probe. Trump's lawyers have rejected terms set out by Robert Mueller's special counsel for a sit-down with their client, aka the president. They have said they consider questioning the president about possible obstruction of justice to be legally inappropriate. For someone who wants this interview over with, Ed, it seems like the president and his lawyers really doing everything they can to see it not happen.
No, it's his lawyers. His lawyers know he will commit perjury. There is nothing to stop him from doing it. They can't stop him from doing it. Now, what happens next? Mueller can go to a grand jury and summon the president to testify. In the past, the presidents have testified just before that event. I don't think he will. He's going to play this all the way to the Supreme Court. And with a new justice, who knows where it'll turn. But I don't think the justices will support him because they go on precedent. And in the Nixon case and in the Clinton case, they said a president has an obligation to testify because no man is above the law. The basic premise of American judicial system.
US of Ed is produced in the studios of 2SER 107.3 in Sydney. To help support the work we do, go to 2ser.com/donate. Ed and I'll be back next week to talk the latest in American news and politics. Subscribe on iTunes and Whooshka to stay up to date, or show us some love on Facebook and Twitter.